Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. We are back for a bonus episode. We're spoiling you now. The Euros are over. It means that we can get back to our regular scheduled programming, and we kind of feel like we owe you an episode. For the ones we've missed out in the last few weeks, with our focus on the Euros, so we thought to ourselves, what better way to bring you a lucky bonus than to bring in a special guest from the Danish region. We've decided to go Danish this week. We are going to look at the return of the season in Denmark. I know some of you in the past have asked us, why aren't we covering Denmark and that kind of thing? And we've decided to bring in a very special guest to do that. So my name is Jonathan Fadugba, and I'm delighted to say I am joined by Henry from Football in DK, a fairly new Twitter account, but has grown quite quickly and is doing very well. It's an English take on the wonderful world of Danish Superligaen. And as I mentioned, they obviously got to the semi-finals of the Euros, and the league season starts this week. So yeah, we brought in Henry, and we're gonna give a kind of a season preview of Denmark in this episode. So Henry, how are you today? And thank you very much for joining us.
Hey Jonathan, great to be here. And yeah, it's brilliant. After the Euros finished on Sunday, we've only had to wait 5 days for meaningful football to resume. So the Superliga starts tomorrow, and very excited to have some more reasons to be in front of the TV watching football.
Yeah, 100%. And it's always I always say this on the podcast with Steve. It's one of the things that we love a lot about the Nordic leagues. The fact that they're summer leagues and they kind of play at different times to maybe the rest of the European season gives it a bit of a different flavor, doesn't it? And it means in the summer months, you've got some games to watch and some football to get your teeth into. So that is one of the reasons I've always enjoyed it. I wonder if that's one of the reasons that you enjoyed it as well. I mean, tell us about your background, because obviously I know you personally. For those who don't know, obviously I get on very well with you. But you only recently created this account, and you've really taken a strong interest in Danish football, haven't you? The account was created in May 2021, and like I say, it's grown rapidly. You've amassed a good following already. There certainly is a kind of a gap there, isn't there, for Danish football coverage, and you've already filled it quite well. Tell us about how you got into it. What attracted you to Danish football, and from an English point of view, and also, how are you enjoying it so far? What are the advantages, strengths of the league? What attracted you to it?
Yeah, so I mean, you know me. I'm a huge football fan. I've had a season ticket at an unnamed Premier League club for over 25 years. So I watch a lot of football, and I think it was about maybe 2.5 or 3 years ago. I was just minding my own business on YouTube, and up came this documentary to watch in my sort of recommended videos, and the thumbnail is. I think it was very similar to what's on my Twitter header at the moment, but it's just a picture of Thomas Delaney in the FC Copenhagen shirt with this sort of flare-lit stand in the background, and it just looked like this sort of crazy atmosphere. And I thought, what is this? Is this an English player like playing abroad? And I was just really sort of interested to watch this, and of course, very quickly found out Thomas Delaney. Not English, not Irish, but obviously has some Irish background. But just watching it, I thought, this is a league that we almost have no exposure to in the UK. Incredible atmospheres, really sort of passionate support, and great football. And I thought, this is something that I'm missing out on. And when I looked around, there was just absolutely zero coverage in the UK. It wasn't on TV. There was very, very little English language journalism on it, and so it sort of became this quest to try and understand more about the league and sort of get under the skin of it. I think if thinking about growing up with Premier League football, you have content falling out of every single football website you go on, and there's almost too much to take in. And with the Danish league, it was very different. I had to go through lots of Google Translate and lots of picking through the web to find the stories. But when I did that, I found this is a really exciting league, and lots of the top Scandinavian players that you see in the top leagues have come through the Danish Superliga, and so yeah, that was what really sort of got me interested in it in the first place. And yeah, over the past couple of years, I've really sort of started watching more and more and trying to understand the storylines and see the players and see the development that goes on. And it's been a really exciting journey. I'm by no means an expert, but I've definitely taken a huge interest in it. And yes, really excited for this next season to come up, because there's just so many potential storylines and so much talent in the league.
Yeah, and it couldn't really be a better timing in terms of the success of Denmark, can it, at the Euros? I mean, such an incredible story, and the fact that they, of course, reached the semi-finals. I mean, Denmark have won the Euros in the past, so it's not like it was a history-making achievement, but it was huge nonetheless, given the expectations and how well they performed, isn't it? I mean, the reason I say that is because sometimes people talk Denmark down as a national team, but actually they're very they've got good history, and also they're strong. I think they're one of the top 10 in FIFA ranked in the world, and so people did maybe underlook them from that point of view, but it was still nonetheless quite a big achievement and a big success, wasn't it? What's the vibe at the moment? I mean, everybody must be kind of buzzing around that and really happy. I know that obviously the loss to England and the penalty was in some ways controversially received back home, but has the focus sort of shift now to the new season and that kind of thing, or what's the mood right now? Because I think you were recently out there, am I right in saying?
Yeah, I was, and I think everyone still sort of has this like very sort of obvious pride in how the national team performed, and I think they did themselves proud on and off the pitch. Seeing what happened in that first game, that really, really tragic situation, and how they picked themselves up from that and rallied round and sort of did it for Christian Eriksen, and to get to within a hair's breadth of reaching the final without their sort of talismanic number 10 is really a phenomenal achievement. And I think had they gone on to win it, they would have been good value for it. I think ultimately they were certainly one of the best 4 teams there, if not one of the best 2. So yeah, I think they they really sort of captured people's imaginations this summer and almost became everyone's second team. And looking at the squad, I think it was 20 out of the 26 had played in the Superliga at some point, and some of the ones who didn't were people like Kasper Schmeichel, who obviously had a grew up in the UK and so wasn't sort of part of one of the youth academies. But one of the great things about watching the Danish Superliga is you get to see these talented players early on in their career, and already there's players that I'm seeing leaving the league, and you feel this sort of you feel like you've had a sneak preview of the talent that they have by playing in the league and seeing them go on to sort of play in the Premier League or the Bundesliga. You really sort of have a sense of pride of having watched them in their earlier stages.
Yeah, 100%. And I think do you feel like that has kind of translated into interest in the domestic league? Because sometimes, for example, when we talk about Sweden and Norway on the podcast, achievements at national level can then filter through to the domestic league. Sweden, for example, the 2018 World Cup, I remember that they did quite well in that tournament, and then obviously the league returned a week later, because it's like you say, it's a summer league, and there's a real excitement around the league for the first few weeks. I really remember it, and some of the players who were domestic based or had played domestically, they were talked about a lot and that kind of thing. What's the feeling now going into this new season? And also tell us about the league structure, because I'm very familiar with Norway and Sweden, but Denmark, they do things a little bit differently, don't they? I mean, they are the biggest ranked nation in the region, if you look at it in terms of the UEFA coefficients, based on the team success and that kind of thing in European competitions. So they are really the big boys compared to Norway and Sweden. But they do things a little bit differently, don't they, in their structure of league?
Yeah. So how the league is structured is you've got 12 teams, and they play 22 games, and after that point, the league then splits into two groups of 6. So you have the championship group and you have the relegation group, and then they go on to play 10 games more. So you play a total of 32 games in the season, but the final 10 games are in that split. And once you're split into those groups, you can't leave that group. So if you're in the championship group, you can't finish lower than 6th. And if you're in the relegation group, you can't finish higher than 7th. But in order to keep things interesting, they give the top place in the relegation group a playoff for the final Europa Conference League spot. So this season, the fourth place team from the Championship group played the top place team from the relegation group, and it was a very, very exciting game. But in the Championship group, how it worked last season was the top two teams get Champions League places, and then the next two teams, so third and fourth, get Europa Conference League places. So the only Europa League spot went to the cup winner, which was a slightly strange way of doing things, but it seemed to work. But it means that there's a huge amount of difference between finishing third and second. The potential prize money for getting into the Champions League group stage is monumental compared to the Conference League. So that's how the structure works. But in terms of it starting a bit earlier, I think it's a really great opportunity for people who might watch the Premier League or the Bundesliga, leagues that don't get started for another month, to watch some competitive football. And I think it's week 4 this campaign. We've got the Copenhagen derby with fans back in the stadium. I think it's going to be a full stadium. So, I mean, what an opportunity to see one of the kind of jewel in the crown Scandinavian derbies in just a few weeks' time. And so, part of the reason for setting up the Twitter account was because I think this is a league that people would enjoy. If you're in the UK, there's absolutely no reason why you wouldn't enjoy the football that's being played there, and the storylines, and the sort of the quality of football. So get involved. You've got a month before the Premier League starts. Get involved, and you might just be hooked.
Yeah, and there are a lot of really interesting teams, like you said there, and backstories kind of to the different teams. I mean, I always get the sense with Denmark, it's kind of a league where you get a lot of players who move on as well, don't you? And those players tend to go on to quite a high level as well. The ones who do kind of get out of the league and move on to things, they do seem to progress quite well. I mean, you've got teams like kind of Nordsjælland, for example, who we'll talk about, I suppose. FC Copenhagen have always been a sort of a powerhouse, haven't they? Brøndby, a team with a proud history. I mean, just give us a background on where we are. Give us an introduction to the Danish Superligaen for those who may not know much about it. Probably me included, to be honest. I mean, who are the current champions? How did the last season go? What's the state of play, if you see what I mean? Because, like I said, there's some big names in the league, but where are they coming from based on last season?
Sure. So last season was really quite extraordinary. You had going into the final weekend, you had 3 teams who could all win the title. So it was massive excitement. And yet, I think for FC Copenhagen to have won it, it required a 9-goal swing. But technically, there were still 3 teams that could win it on the final weekend. And I think traditionally, looking back over the last 10 years, the Superliga has really been a 2-horse race. It's either been FC Copenhagen or it's been Midtjylland. And out of those last 10. FC Copenhagen have won 5 and Midtjylland had won 3. So going into this season, just gone, there was no reason to think that was going to change. And really for much of the back end of the season, it looked like Midtjylland were going to cruise to the title. They were in the first position for the 8 straight weeks, really going into the final 2 rounds. And that's when things started to get a bit interesting. So after a really terrible start, FC Copenhagen were, having a late surge in the season, and they were playing Midtjylland in the penultimate round. And they were sort of faced with this situation where if they won, it gave them, it kept alive this tiny hope that they might win the league, but it also kept alive very much the hope of finishing second and getting into the Champions League. But if they did that, they knew that they'd be doing Brøndby, their arch rivals, a huge favour in the title race. As it happened, FC Copenhagen won quite comfortably that game. I think it was 4-2, and sort of gave Brøndby the chance to be in the driving seat for the final round. And really, as soon as Brøndby got that opportunity, they never really looked like losing it. And so they were the title winners for the first time since the 2004-2005 season. So it'd been a long wait for them. And I think the celebrations really sort of bore out how long that wait had been. And I think that at the beginning of the season, the idea that Brøndby would have been champions would have been unexpected even for their fans. But they really took advantage of the fact that FC Copenhagen had a really poor start. They only picked up 4 points from their first 5 games, and they also took advantage of that sort of late collapse by Midtjylland. And really kind of like driving them forward to that with these. They had 2 standout players. So Mikael Jura, striker, he scored 19 goals last season, and he'd been in the league for 4 seasons before that, and had scored 2 seasons where he scored 5 goals each season, and 2 seasons where he'd scored 6. So going from 6 goals a season to 19 was really fundamental to that title win. And looking at his XG for the season, he was 18.4. So it's not even like he was dramatically outperforming. He had a season to remember, for sure. And he's really going to need to find that form again next season if Brøndby are going to have any chance of repeating that. And alongside him was Jesper Lindstrom, and he has just agreed a transfer a few days ago to Eintracht Frankfurt. So another example of a player, going straight to the big leagues at a very young age. He's just 21. And Lindstrom popped up with 10 goals, 10 assists. And really, I think that there's an argument for him being the standout player in the league last season. He's, at 21, he's already, to me, a complete number 10. He scores goals from range with both feet, got really impressive ball control, really intelligent runs on and off the ball. And he was just everywhere last season. So that combination of Lindstrom and Jura really sort of helped seal that title win. That title win for Brøndby.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating because it was the first title win for Brøndby for how long is it? 15 years?
Longer, yeah.
Yeah, since 2005, in fact. So I didn't really know that they were kind of back to back to their kind of maybe where they'd like to think they belong. I mean, they've won the title 11 times, and they've also won the Danish Cup 7 times. So they're a massive club, Brøndby. What is the dynamics of the Copenhagen scene in particular? Before we sort of look to this season, just tell us a little bit about the rivalries, because you mentioned it, and I know some people will be very familiar with it, but some might not be. So just tell us about a couple of those big rivalries, because as well as the sort of Brøndby FC Copenhagen, there's kind of a few other rivalries popping up now, isn't there, based on the last sort of say 10 years of success and things like that?
Yeah, I think that I'll speak about it from my understanding. I think I'm never gonna understand it as well as someone who lives it, someone local who lives it. But FC Copenhagen are the sort of the Manchester United of Denmark, and so they're big, they're very well polished, they've got a huge number of supporters, but you either love them or you hate them. And so if you don't support them, they're not going to have the support of any neutrals. They came from a merger of 2 teams, and I think there was some sort of bad feeling from the sort of wider football public that this was a sort of an unfair shortcut to becoming a sort of a super team, kind of amalgamating these 2 already large Copenhagen teams. Brøndby are much more the sort of traditional, fan-led team. They're one of the most they're one of the clubs that is run by the fans. So from the like supporters shop and the stadium, like the feel is completely different. I think with FC Copenhagen, it feels much more like a sort of very slick, polished operation, whereas Brøndby feels much more like a sort of traditional, old-fashioned football club that puts the fans very much first. And so clearly, there's a huge rivalry there. There's a number of other sort of interesting rivalries that are more down to geographic location. One of the teams that are new to the league this season, Viborg, they have a rivalry with FC Midtjylland, and that's probably the biggest rivalry in. I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but Jylland. And there's also been a rivalry between AGF, Aarhus, and Brøndby that's been there sort of since the late 80s. That was really a time when both clubs were fighting for the title. So it sort of is a rivalry that came from the pitch. And one of the storylines that is quite interesting is FC Copenhagen bought an Aarhus player, Jens Stage, in 2019, and that led to some really sort of bad feeling from the supporters. I think his apartment was attacked, and FC Copenhagen sort of off the back of that went on and recruited the director of football from Aarhus as well. And so there's been a sort of maybe not a rivalry, but a little bit of tension in that matchup as well. It's added a little bit of intensity to those games.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, a bit like Sweden. There's rivalries everywhere you look, to be honest, different sort of. But yeah, no, it's fascinating because I know Brøndby Copenhagen it's a big derby, isn't it? That's one of those ones that people say try and get yourself to if you can. One of those bucket list type games.
Yeah, it's huge, and the choreography from both sides is, it's up there with the choreography from any of the derbies that I've seen across the world, whether it's in Italy or Argentina or whatever. I think it's really inventive, like loads of noise, loads of flares. Yeah, it just looks amazing. And as I said, that's coming up in week 4 of the calendar, so something that I would urge anyone who's new to the league to watch and not be moved by.
Fantastic stuff. So let's get into it. We're going to sort of preview the season now, and we're going to do it in a sort of traditional Nordic football podcast fashion, slightly condensed. Normally on the show, we in the season previews we predict sort of every position in the table, and we do a 10 to watch. But we're not going to do a sort of bumper show like we normally do on that. We're going to do a sort of condensed version. So I've asked Henry to kind of put together a top 6 for his predictions for the season to come, and then through that we'll talk about those teams, talk about the title race, and then we've also asked him to name some players to watch in our traditional style. So let's get into it. Henry, we're going to let's start at the top of the table. So we got you to predict 1 to 6 basically, and then we'll go through those teams. So without further ado, who is your tip to win the title this season? We'll start from 1 to 6 rather than 6 to 1. I think that's more relevant. So yeah, who have you got to tip?
Yeah, so picking the champions was hard for me. It was really a toss-up between FC Copenhagen and FC Midtjylland, which will probably come as no surprise. But one of the big caveats that I'll put in here is that the transfer window still has a month to run, and there are rumours about big players from both sides, going, and so I think that will change things slightly. But based on what I expect to happen, I'm predicting that FC Copenhagen will end their 2-season drought and become champions next season, with FC Midtjylland right behind them. 3 to 6 is also quite difficult to predict. Even without Jesper Lindstrom, I feel like Brøndby had enough in their locker to come third, so I've put them third. AGF Aarhus I have in 4th, FC Nordsjælland in 5th, and then 6th is a toss-up between either VB or OB, so Vela or Odense. And yeah, again, it's a really hard one to call. I'll say VB, Vela, for now. But yeah, I'm sure I'll be proven wrong on some of these, but let's see.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, being proven wrong is something that happens to us regularly on this show. I mean, I know Steve will be watching. I don't want to ask him about his predictions at this moment because he might have some egg on his face. But no, I'm just joking, Steve, by the way, if you're listening. But no, what I want to do is I'm just going to read out the table from last season. So, I'll read all 12 places because it's a 12-team league as well, as you said. We had in the relegation group Horsens, then Lyngby. This is sort of from going from bottom to top basically. So Horsens, Lyngby, Vejle, hopefully I got that right. Vejle, Odense, Sonderriska, and then Aalborg. And then in the championship group in 6th we had Randers. In 5th, we had Nordsjælland. In 4th, we had AGF Aarhus. In 3rd, we had FC Copenhagen. 2nd, FC Midtjylland. And then, as you said there, by 1 point, Brøndby IF as the champions. So you've given your predictions there. Let's start with FC Copenhagen. What's your rationale behind it? Tell us about the team, the setup, kind of players that might be interesting to look out for, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so one of the sort of really interesting things that happened last season was the manager Ståle Solbakken left after over 10 years across 2 different spells with the club. And that happened after this sort of disastrous start that I alluded to earlier. And I think what that did was it gave FC Copenhagen basically the rest of the season almost as a free hit to experiment. And, they tried more tactical approaches than any other team in the league when Jes Thorup took over. And I think he sort of found a system that worked. So Copenhagen finished the season with the best attack. They scored 61 goals. They had the highest XG of any team. And I think kind of central to that was Jonas Wind, obviously, one of the few Superliga players who made it to the Euros. He scored 15 goals, 8 assists. And so going forward, I think that the formula is there and there's a heck of a lot of talent. Where the problem was for FC Copenhagen was a really leaky defense. So if you look at their goal difference at the end of the season, it was +8, and by comparison, Midtjylland was +24, Brøndby +20. And I think that one of the things that isn't going to help that is that Zanka, who you'll know from his Huddersfield days in the Premier League, he was on loan back at FC Copenhagen. He's a bit of an FC Copenhagen legend. He was back last season on loan, and he hasn't thus far re-signed. And there are very, very strong rumours about Victor Nelson departing for the Premier League. And Victor Nelson's probably the outstanding defender in the league for me, the Danish under-21 captain. So I'm kind of banking on the fact that on that leaky defence sort of being fixed through pre-season, but also there's been some quite interesting new signings that have come in already. And I think what's interesting about the signings as well is that for the most part, they're known quantities. So they're players who have played in the league already. So you don't have that that sort of potential that they're not going to fit in with the style of the league. You kind of know they're tried and tested. So they brought in Kevin Dix, who was on loan last season at Aarhus. He's a very, very exciting fullback. He scored 7 goals and got 1 assist in the league. And he's sort of done the rounds on loan. He's at he was at Fiorentina, but he's been on loan at Feyenoord and a number of other clubs. But he really sort of found his feet in the Superliga last season and looked really, really good. He was very important to what Aarhus were doing. And so he's come in on a free transfer, along with another player who was on loan at Aarhus last season, Grabara, who's a goalkeeper from Liverpool, actually. And so they've come in. They're both going to be starters. And whether he's to replace Zanka or Nelson, I don't know. But a centre-back has also come in from Shakhtar Donetsk, Kocholava, I believe, if I'm pronouncing it right, a Georgian centre-back. And so obviously with Shakhtar, he's played at a very high level. And I think he's going to slot in there and be an important part of that defence. And then finally, they made a loan signing permanent. So Lucas Leringer, a Danish player who was on loan last season, he's been signed on a permanent deal, and I think that's just reflective of his performances in the second half of last season. He looked really comfortable, and yeah, I think that combination of new signings and a team that's finally starting to settle a bit under a new manager. Having those 6 or 7 months to sort of get sorted, I think puts them in a really good position. And I think if you've got the best attack, I prefer that scenario and fixing the defense a little than the other way around. The second best defense in the league was Randers, and they were in 6th. So it just goes to show that a really strong attack is preferable.
Yeah, I've been to the FC Copenhagen Stadium. In fact, I've been fortunate enough to visit that stadium. I went to see Copenhagen against Manchester United in the Champions League. I remember my two overwhelming memories of that game were, number one, it was absolutely freezing cold, the coldest I've ever been at LX State. I think it was mid-December or something like that, around early December. It was so cold. And number two, the United fans were in the bottom tier, and when FC Copenhagen scored, somebody threw. Well, they all. I think it's a tradition in Denmark, isn't it? They all throw their pints in the air.
Yeah.
There was a pint literally about to land square on the top of my head, and then the person in the seat next to me spotted it and pushed me out of the way. As he pushed me out of the way, I looked on the floor, and there was a full pint just burst everywhere, and I was like, I did not need to be drenched in beer. He literally saved my evening there from sort of hypothermia. But it's always fascinating when you look at the sort of squads in Scandinavia. I always find, because you always spot a few gems, you always spot a few players that you may have heard. I mean, Victor Fischer. I remember him. Everybody thought he might have a sort of a big career abroad. I noticed he's there now. You mentioned one or two others, obviously Brian Oviedo, formerly playing in the Premier League.
Yeah,
it's always funny when you see those kind of players, isn't it? So you got them to finish at the top. In terms of the manager, do you think do they have the best manager? Do you think as well, or is there question marks there?
I mean, I really liked Solbakken, and I think that it might just have been a case that he'd come to the end of the line. He'd been there a bit too long, and this sort of bad run was an excuse to get rid of him. But he's a phenomenal manager, and I think following in his footsteps is always going to be hard. It's almost the sort of the Arsene Wenger effect. He's sort of held in similar regard there. But we'll see what Thorup does, and the fact that he's got the attack firing so well, I think, is a really sort of positive start. Funny that you mentioned the European campaign, because I was going to bring up another FC Copenhagen Man United game from only a couple of years ago, and it was the Europa League quarter-final, and Man United won 1-0 on aggregate, but it was a very, very tight victory. And I think FC Copenhagen showed in that game, that they were able to mix it with some of the best teams in Europe and be there on merit. And I think that this season, the fact that they're in they're not in the Champions League, they're not in the Europa League, gives them the opportunity to sort of go quite far in the Europa Conference League potentially, and also not have to play their first team the whole way through. And I think that could be quite an important ingredient to them if a title run looks possible. The fact that there's a little bit less pressure than there would be if it was the Champions League.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point there, because that FC Copenhagen team, their deep run in that Europa League, it didn't really get the kind of credit or recognition it deserved it at the time. I think it's because partly COVID was just about to sit in, and I think that really overshadowed that tie, didn't it? I remember those games, and kind of that whole run from FC Copenhagen doing so well didn't really get probably the recognition that it would have had there been a different background to it. So that's fascinating stuff. I mean, let's move on to your tip for second place.
Yes,
Midtjylland. Now they're a team that I don't know how to sort of describe them. I mean, I know they've got the kind of Brentford type model there. They've got similar ownership, haven't they? They're always sort of referred to as a sort of a model club, but they're a bit of they're kind of upstarts, aren't they, in Danish football in that context? Is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. They're they definitely have a unique way of operating. So they make the most obscure signings for sure, but there are as many hits as misses. So that they've got a good recruitment record, and their football's exciting, but they are out in Jutland, so they're not anywhere near Copenhagen. They're sort of far out in about as far west as you can go in the country. So they're there, and they are steadily making a name for themselves in the game just by their performances on the pitch. I think for a large part of the last 10 years they've been the number one team, and they've done some quite incredible upsets in the Champions League, and they're always there or thereabouts in the title race. They lost their manager over the summer break. So Brian Prisker left to join Antwerp, and was replaced by Bo Henriksen, who was unattached when he joined, but he was previously at Horsens, who, you know, as you mentioned, were one of the two relegated teams. So, but a slightly unusual appointment. But he arrives and takes charge of the best defense in the league. So they only conceded 33 goals in 32 games. So he kind of has this defensive unit to work with. And like the majority of teams in the league, they play with a back three. One of those three centre backs, who was really important, Schultz, he left for Japan. Interestingly, so, you know, 28-year-old centre back went and joined a Japanese team just as he had the opportunity to play a Champions League campaign. But he's one of these sort of larger than life characters. Schultz, you know, obviously was very excited about the opportunity of playing in a completely new league, completely new country, new culture, and that challenge was exciting to him. So he left for Japan, and sort of typical to their recruitment strategy, they've brought in a couple of players from the Brazilian Serie A league, so Juninho and Charles. I can't say I know a great deal about either of them, but one that we do know a bit more about, who they brought in, was a free transfer from Brentford, Damsgaard, very experienced fullback, and you know, he'll add a lot of sort of experience and defensive nous to that team. But I think what stands them in good stead for a top two finish is that they've got a very well established front three. So Evander, Kaba, and Dreyer. And Kaba is your sort of typical number 9, and then you've got Evander and Dreyer sort of like buzzing down the wings, and that attacking trio is really potent. They had the most shots in the league last season. Not the most goals, so perhaps the quality wasn't there. But yeah, they're a very dangerous front three, and when paired with that super strong defense, you know, that's a unit to be reckoned with. The only reason I haven't tipped them for the title this season is I feel like with the Champions League campaign they have, I feel like they might be pulled in that direction a little bit too much, and it just might provide too many fixtures for them. But, you know, as I said, it was a very hard decision to pick that top two. So if they're up there at the end of the season, you know, it wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah, and like you say, they've got that kind of curious sort of recruitment model, haven't they? I've noticed they've also signed a player from Brentford called Jared Thompson as a goalkeeper. So I don't know, from Brentford B, I don't know if he's going to get much game time. But yeah, that Brentford Midtjylland link, like you said, with Henrik Dalsgaard is always there, isn't it? So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, 2 Brazilians to keep an eye out for as well. So yeah, an interesting side. Midtjylland, have they had much success in recent years in terms of trophies and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, they've won the title 3 times in the last 10 years. So, you know, I mean, given they're a very new team, that's a, you know, phenomenal rise to fame, and it's really testament to their sort of their way of doing things. So that sort of like Moneyball-esque recruitment and focus on tactics and analytics has you know, really kind of gave them that initial advantage. I think that other teams are sort of catching up in that regard, but they're really the pioneers of that, and not just in Denmark, but kind of across Europe. They're known as one of the teams that really sort of pioneered that approach.
Yeah, and they have, like you say, their first title came in 2015, so they are quite a new club in terms of success. Only founded in 1999, but yeah, you know, their most recent title 2020, so they'll be looking to maybe get their 4th one on the you know, in the bag. And there's a couple of players as well that we'll talk about later. We are going to sort of I have asked Henry to do a sort of players to watch, so we will talk about 1 or 2 names shortly. So yeah, for those who want to know a bit more about Jens Cahoust in particular, keep an eye out for you know, the second part of the show. But yeah, they've got a few others, Pioni Sisto, who I've met actually in the past and interviewed, Joel Anderson for some people who may you know, if you tune into the Swedish part, he was at Bäckhaken, so it's interesting to see how he's been getting along. So yeah, quite a few names there to keep an eye on if you're going to be following Midtjylland. Let's look at the 3rd place prediction for yourself. You've got Brøndby, who are the current champions. Let us know your rationale behind that. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, so it really comes down to those two factors I talked about before. Can Mikael Jura have another 19-goal season? Probably not, but if he can have somewhere between a 6-goal and a 19-goal season, then I think that would be excellent. And how much will the loss of Jesper Lindstrom hurt them? At the moment, we haven't quite seen enough preseason to know, who's gonna sort of fill that void. I know that Simon Hedlund popped up with a huge number of assists last season. I think it was 10 assists. So, it might be that he can take up some of the slack. But one thing that was really interesting about Brøndby last season is that they were by far and away the biggest runners. So, as a team, they covered just shy of 68 kilometers per game, which is 20% above the league average. So it's that they're a very industrious team and work really hard. And I think that, in a league like this, that's definitely worth a huge number of points a season to just, keep going and having that tenacity and showing that fight. So I've got them in third. I don't think they're going to threaten the top two this season, but I think that they are going to definitely provide a challenge for some of the European teams they might come up against, just because of that work rate and that tenacity they've got.
Yeah, and you mentioned Oscar Fellaini. He's another one that we've had on. Well, we've talked about a bit on the podcast in the past. That you will notice in this league, in the Danish league, that there is a trend of sort of top players from Norway and Sweden tending to go there, because it is like we said, a bigger league, probably slightly bigger budgets, especially for the top clubs. Anyway, Fellaini was a player at Brøndby Poikene. Now, if you go back in our archives and you go back to October 2020, we had an interview with Brøndby Poikene's then manager, Sean Constable. And he talked about Fellaini, and he talked about the youth academy there. Fellaini is 19-year-old, isn't he? Left-sided player. And I remember, I think in the episode, Sean raving about Fellaini, among others. So, maybe if you want to go back and listen to the kind of the academy at Brøndby Poikene, then feel free to dig into our archives. You can follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. But yeah, that's sounds like an interesting side to watch. I mean, Brøndby, everybody knows they're a giant of the league, really, aren't they? And as you said, they'll be looking also to maybe go make some strides in European football. So, we'll see how they get on. I mean, are they the biggest supported club in the league, would you say?
I think it would still be FC Copenhagen. Just the scale they have is massive, and I think the sustained success they've had recently as well. In the social media era, I think they're the best supported. But both sides have actually close to breaking season ticket sale records this season. So FC Copenhagen just announced they had broken past the 16,000 season ticket sales, and I think the record's 16,700. I think I read. So they're not far off breaking that record, and I think Brøndby are close to breaking their record as well. So the enthusiasm for fans to get back in the stadium and support their teams is after such a period of reduced capacities or empty stadiums. It's really fantastic to see.
Yeah, and just on Lindstrom, as you mentioned, according to Transfermarkt, it was £6.3 million the fee, which is enormous.
Yeah, I mean, for the Danish league, that's a hefty fee. I still, having grown up on Premier League football, it still kind of blows my mind that one of the top players, if not the top player in the league, can go for that sort of money. But I think that when you see how smartly the money's spent, and as you mentioned, the other Scandinavian leagues, what you can buy when you're out shopping with €7 million is quite significant. So I think it's just a case of that the league hasn't quite got the prestige to be able to command that much bigger fees at the moment. But the figures that are being quoted for Victor Nelson, I've heard €15 million. I mean, that would be a record transfer for the Danish league by several million. So I think that the quality of the league is being acknowledged more and more. And I think that you'll see Lindstrom, if he continues on this trajectory, he'll be a 20-30 million pound player before the next few years are out.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff, and like you say, it's something you definitely get used to as another sort of fellow English, someone who follows the English leagues. When you are sort of covering Sweden, for example, I know that I think 6.3 is close to a Swedish record, to be honest. So it's not far off it. So yeah, you know the reduced fees, but it just shows you that it's a bit more of a modest league, and it's part of the reason that we kind of like it in a way, isn't it? I think, to be honest. Let's look at 4th, 5th, and 6th, and I'm going to ask you a question. We probably won't talk in too much detail about them, but I want to ask you to go through each of them and tell me a reason, or tell the listeners who might be sort of new to this league and trying to pick a team to support. What are the kind of maybe pros and cons of each side in terms of, or pros in particular? You know, what are the positive reasons to maybe get behind each of these sides? It could be a transfer, it could be fan base, it could be. I mean, Nordsjælland, like you say, I think many people know about Nordsjælland in terms of they've got a really exciting backstory, but just give us sort of pros about each team if you could in brief.
Yeah, so I think Aarhus are a really sort of interesting team. That their style is very much in line with some of the teams that we find in the Premier League. So you're sort of like maybe you're like Burnley's, for example, or your Stokes. So they score the most set piece goals in the league. So I think almost 50% of their goals last season were set pieces. They scored the most headed goals in the league with 10. They were the worst passers with less than 70% completion. So that their style was very much, mixer, and their fullbacks were really important to that. So Kevin Dix, who I mentioned, who went to FC København, 7 goals, 1 assist, and Hoyer, who went to Sparta Prague with one of the most bizarre unveiling videos I think I've ever seen, complete with plastic Viking swords. He got 3 goals and 8 assists. So the fullbacks were like fundamentals there. Get down the flanks, put the ball in the middle, and their striker Mortensen, he received the ball more than any other player in the league, so he was really like the focal point. Scored 15 goals, and they've just added to their squad David Kerminowski, who was the top scorer in the Slovakian Super League last season. So if you like that more sort of traditional approach, AGF Aarhus are excellent to watch for that, and very well supported, great atmosphere at their stadium, and they'll give you sort of no nonsense football, but that gets results.
Yeah, fascinating. I don't know a huge amount about them, I have to be honest. So that one I'll be keeping an eye on them. And what about Nordsjælland?
Yeah, so as you alluded to, like Nordsjælland's kind of an anomaly in that they're a team that's owned by an academy, but like rather than the other way around. They're the youngest team in the league, and they play really, really attractive football. They're the best passers in the league, 80% plus pass completion. They spread their goals throughout the team. So I think there were 18 players who scored in the league last season, and compare that with the champions Brøndby, who only had 12. That they really celebrate this kind of like team first ethic, and promoting youth players. They have this academy in Ghana, the Right to Dream Academy, and they're opening a second academy in Egypt, and then they have the academy in Denmark, and there's this sort of really nice approach where it's all about developing people as players, but also as human beings, and like putting their long-term development ahead of the short-term gain of the football pitch, on the football pitch. But they are one of the most exciting teams to watch, just because of this kind of like youthful energy they have. At the sort of second half of last season, they were starting this very exciting 16-year-old Norwegian player, Sheldrup. You've probably come across him. He came from Bodo Glimt, and he was starting in the league at 16 years old, and holding, like, more than holding his own. He was contributing 3 goals, 3 assists, but he was really like running the show at times, and combine that with a player that most of your listeners will have heard of, but Kamaldeen Sulemana, who I would have put Nordsjælland higher in my prediction if I wasn't so convinced that he was leaving. I think the last thing I heard was that he was headed to Rennes, having been on the verge of signing for Ajax, but he was the focal point for them. 10 goals, 8 assists last season, and he was probably the outstanding talent in the Superligaen, and he's going to go on to have an outstanding career. Really, really exciting player, and I think that it's going to be a great loss to the league when he goes. But I think it's the right time for his development. I think he's outgrown the league here. And he was one of the highlights of watching Nordsjælland last season. But the thing with their approach is there's going to be someone who fills his space and sets the world on fire as well, just because that's what they do.
Yeah, I think if I'm right in saying, I think they have 6 Ghanaian players on their first team books as well. I mean, Suleiman is one. Mohammed Kudus is one who's left in the past as well, and he went to Ajax. He was at Nordsjælland as well. They've got that right to dream link. Tom Vernon, I believe, is the chairman, and they've done fantastic work there. It's a really fascinating club. I think they as you mentioned, they've grown quite well, and they won the league in 2012. So yeah, it looks like they're in for potentially quite a good season. What about the 6th place teams that you've got? You're tied.
Yeah. So before I talk about them, you mentioned earlier that that Midtjylland were a new club, only being founded in 1999. Nordsjælland were founded in 2003. So an even younger club that is up there mixing it. So yeah, really interesting. But yeah, in 6th place I've got VB Vela, and the reason I've put them in there is because they've got 2 of the most sort of exciting players in the league in Alan Souza and Wahid Fagir, and we're going to talk about those 2 specifically a little bit later. But I think that combination of those 2 could really, if they manage to hang on to both of them this window, I think that could be enough to power them into the championship group. But it's so hard to predict at this point at that end of the table, where there's not a lot separating teams from sort of like 6 to 10 perhaps.
Do they have any sort of set style or anything like that of play? Are they kind of fluid team? Are they get in your face or?
There's some really nice combination play between those 2 players, and like Souza is very much like a direct dribbler, and so they are an exciting team to watch. They're not sort of a team that just sort of like lumps it long. In terms of like a specific formation, I can't recall precisely how they set up last season, but yeah, let me get back to you on that one.
No problem at all. So yeah, no, that is the table basically. So we've got 6th place. We've got Nordsjælland 5th. We got AGF in 4th. We've got Brøndby 3rd. Midtjylland 2nd. FC København in 1st. Fantastic stuff. Now we're going to move on to players to watch now. So I'm going to ask you sort of maybe 1 minute on each player, roughly tops. So take it away. Do you want to read out firstly your list of 8 to keep an eye on this season? That's a big tradition on the Nordic Football Podcast. So yes, take it away.
Yeah. So this list would have included Victor Nelson and Kamaldeen Sulemana, had I not been so convinced that they're going to be sold in the next few days. So I don't want to get people's hopes up. But otherwise, I would very much be talking about them. But yeah, we're going to start with Jonas Wind, who is a player that it should be very familiar to people, given he was in the Danish Euro 2020 squad. He started the first game, I believe, that sort of ill-fated first group game, and never really regained his place after that. But he's a phenomenal talent. Really led the line well for FC Copenhagen last season, and probably the best penalty taker in the league. He got plenty of opportunities to take penalties last season, and just every time he steps up, it's just absolutely automatic. You don't need to watch the penalty; you just know it's going to be a goal. But he's a really kind of imposing centre forward, a real sort of physical unit, but excellent footwork and a really great finisher. So he's he's been very exciting to watch. And I think that FC Copenhagen fans have sort of been umming and ahhing about whether he's going to, whether this might be the summer where he's sold. I think it's looking like he's going to stay for another season. I think that would be really good for his development, but also for the prospects of an FC Copenhagen title win, because he is just the kind of the talismanic number 9 that you need. So I'm super excited about watching him this season, and I hope he can stay in the league for at least another season.
Yeah, really interesting. I mean, we got 3 FCK players here. We've got 1 from Brøndby, 1 from Midtjylland, 2 from VB, and 1 from OB. So, so, do you want me to read the list out, or shall I read and then ask you about each one? Or
yeah, sure.
So we've got, as you said there, Jonas Wind, we've got Mohammed Dharami, we've got Rasmus Falk, and we've got Anis Ben Slimani, Jens Kahoost, Wahid Fagir, Alan Souza, and Oliver Christiansen. Tell us about Mohammed Dharami, because he's come to prominence, hasn't he? He's been on the scene for a while, but he's still very young.
He has, he's only 19. But I went out to Copenhagen with a mutual friend of ours a few years ago, and saw him play in a Champions League qualifier. And just even from then, age 17, I believe, he was like caught the eye in his sort of very fast, direct style. And he's shown great signs of development. He's got great footwork. He takes people on. I think if there's a reason for him to kind of stick around in the league a little bit longer, I've seen some rumours of him moving to AC Milan, which I think wouldn't be the right move at this stage. I think he needs to add a little bit more end product to his game. He's he's very fast, very tricky, but he can sort of fade in and out of games. And I think last season he only got 5 goals and 3 assists, and I think that kind of undersells his ability. So I think that this could really be the season where he adds that end product and takes it to the next level. He's got a fantastic attitude. There was a really interesting 5-part documentary. If you're interested, on YouTube, it's got English subtitles, and it sort of charted his journey towards getting Danish citizenship. So even though he was born in Denmark, because his mother wasn't a Danish citizen from birth, and so it was all about how he was sort of trying to get his Danish citizenship so he could represent the national team. But through that, you got an insight into his personality and his approach. And for someone so young, he just seems so professional, so composed. Not caught up in the sort of the high life that can come with being a young, successful footballer in the spotlight, and just seems like a really great guy to have in the squad. And I really hope that he sort of continues on the trajectory that he's going, because I think he could be one of the outstanding players next season.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And let's mix it up actually, because we've done 2 FCK. Let's move to Brøndby. Anis Ben Slimani, 21-year-old central midfielder.
Yeah, so he's a really interesting one. He could have represented Denmark or Tunisia. I think he opted for Tunisia, and he's already a full international for them. In his early 20s. He's not a starter every single game for Brøndby. I think he needs to add a bit more consistency to his game. And this is often a theme with young players in Denmark, that they need to add consistency. And the thing is, as soon as they add that consistency, then they get snapped up by another team. So that's often what happens. But
usually to Belgium. In our experience, but yeah, no.
Exactly. But Slimani he's just a really, really fun player to watch. He's a big guy. I think he's 6'1", 6'2", but just got phenomenal close control and dribbling, but combined with physique. And it's this sort of really unusual combination of of having that ability to beat players and kind of hold your own with the ball with 2 or 3 players around, but then with that physique to almost shrug people off. And I think sometimes he's been perhaps guilty of using that physique a little bit too much, and is maybe at the expense of his technique. But yeah, I think his first touch and his final ball needs a bit of work, but other than that, he's just super exciting to watch, and really looks like he can boss a midfield on his own. So yeah, he's someone I would definitely look out for. Though I think if you're watching him play, you can't fail to notice him.
Yeah, speaking of bossing midfields, this is a player that I'm very excited to talk about on this podcast, to be honest, because I've got a very much sort of fond feelings for this player. He's a Midtjylland. It's Jens Kahoust. Tell me about him, because I love this player.
Yeah, so interestingly, he plays the same position as Slimani, but they're very, very different players. And Kahoust has this sort of interesting backstory where he's part Swedish, part American, but grew up in China. I believe his father was working out there, and so played lots of his early sort of academy football in China, and has found himself at Midtjylland, and really looks like the sort of one of the outstanding central midfielders in the whole league. He's one thing you'll notice about him straight away when you watch him. He's very, very quick to progress the ball. He's always checking his shoulders. As soon as he gets the ball, he'll either run with it, or he'll progress the ball, pass it into the final third. It's got great pace. But he's very, very calm, and for a player who's 21, seeing that sort of calmness and decision making really sort of stands him out as a player who has very, very very high ceiling, and I think unfortunately I don't think he's going to last long in the league before he's snapped up, because he is a really, really outstanding central midfielder.
Yeah, he came through Orgulita Academy in Gothenburg. I remember seeing him when I was out there. And I also had a football manager say with Orgulita where he becomes really, really good. I think it was FM 2017. I can't remember now. But yeah, I mean, a player I nurtured through that academy nicely, and done it better than he did on FM, to be honest. So yeah, it's been... I think when you see players come through academies, I think at the time he was very young at that time, and there was one or two in that Orgulita Academy. They had a good crop of youngsters at that point. They're a proud club in Gothenburg, a big history, but they're in the second division. And I always, when I look back on sort of Orgulita at the moment, they're close to the bottom of the second division. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but yeah, it's just interesting, isn't it? How sort of sometimes clubs don't maybe make the best use of their academy. He left very early, and there's a few others who've gone on whilst they're floundering around, near relegation to third division. So it's crazy how these things can develop. But yes, Jens Kahoust, he's a top player. I think he played against Liverpool, didn't he, in the Champions League, and showed his quality. So I'm sure he's going to move on to big things, to be honest. So yeah, no, I'm glad you've highlighted him, Henry. Great call. Certainly agree with you on that one. Let's look at Wahid Fagir. We have got one more player from FC København, but let's move on to the two VB lads. Yeah,
so Fagir is almost like a player that anyone watching sort of emerging talent will have flagged him. He's outstanding player, starting in the league at 17 even. And there's some very strong rumours that he's going to be moving on purely because a player counts as a homegrown player if they've played 3 years before they're 21, I believe, and his 18th birthday is coming up, and so there's this sort of potential that clubs could sign him and have him count as a homegrown player. So it could be that in a month's time he's not here, but wow, what a player he is, and I'm sure that you will have experienced this watching Swedish and Norwegian football. Any kind of emerging young forward who is sort of larger than their age group physique wise will get the new Ibrahimovic moniker. And of course, it's happened to Fagir, and I feel like it's a bit of a lazy label. He's quite a different player, but there was one comparison with a sort of early, maybe like Ajax era Zlatan that I noticed, which is he's really comfortable and good at taking the ball in the final third and just sort of beating 2 or 3 players with sort of close control and dribbling. It's not something you'd necessarily see much from Zlatan these days, but I remember that distinctly from the Ajax days, that was something that he was very good at. And Fagir has that in spades. He's very good with both feet, and he's able to step up on the big stage. So he scored a phenomenal goal in the under 21s quarterfinal this summer for Denmark, where he, it looked like the ball was going to break through the net. He hit it that hard. But yeah, his combination with Alan Sousa, who we're also going to talk about, has been really exciting to watch last season. And he's a player, Fagir, that I feel again would perhaps benefit from staying in the league a little bit longer, just to sort of to see how he develops. There's always a bit of a risk with players who are very, very big for their age, that perhaps they miss out on some of the fundamentals that you need to learn. But I feel like he's got everything in his locker to succeed.
Yeah, and I mean, when you're that age as well, doing so well at 17, it's always a case of, they may struggle to keep him. You might think. I mean, what about Alan Sousa?
Yeah, I think he's got one of the best set piece deliveries in the league, but he's also a very, very direct dribbler, very fast, and I don't actually have the statistics to hand, but amazing contribution last season in terms of goals and assists. I almost can't understand why at 24 he's still sort of in the bottom half of the Superliga, because he seems like a player who is really, really comfortable with the ball and really able to contribute at the in the attacking third. His final ball is great. He's very, very productive and very exciting player to watch. In terms of his willingness to take players on and dribble past them. I think that's it's part of the game that I feel is disappearing a bit, and so seeing players like Dharami and Sousa, who are willing to run at people and take them on and dribble past them, makes it really exciting.
Yeah, let's hope that's not sort of coached out of him as well. I mean, you said he's a right winger, 24 years old, so certainly looks like VB have a couple of interesting players in their books. And
yeah, they do.
I'm pleased you've got a goalkeeper in there, because I know that well. I know a bit, and I know Meatman Soccer loves a goalkeeper. So Oliver Christensen at OB.
Yeah, so he's an interesting one, because he's got really sort of outstanding, I would say, agility and reflexes. So his ability to save from short range is noticeable. He's very, very good with his feet, almost like five-a-side goalkeeper style. If there's a criticism, it's that he perhaps parries too often. But just watching Jordan Pickford this summer, I really saw similarities between the two of them in terms of that sort of like high energy, like big sort of agility combination. And just perhaps needing to sort of show a little bit more calmness, which I'm sure will come. He's a young guy, 22, but I think he could be one of the potential national team keepers. Once Schmeichel hangs his gloves up in a few years, I'm sure Christensen's going to be one of the names that's up there.
And finally, we go round it off back to FC Copenhagen. You got one more, and that's Rasmus Falk.
Yeah, so kind of bucking the trend of that. Most of the other players that I've shared are sort of younger players, sort of like early 20s. But Rasmus Falk is very much in his prime at 28, and he's a player that when I first saw him play, I kind of wondered why there hadn't been more fuss about him before. Why he's only got 1 or 2 Denmark caps, because he reminds me very much of a kind of pre-decline Mesut Ozil in terms of just how silky and poised he is with the ball. He's full of really good sort of first touches to take the ball away from people, really sort of clever use of the ball. he contributes goals, contributes assists, but he's just that sort of like classic sort of almost playmaker, trequartista type player that's just I feel like is disappearing from the game. And I feel like if Denmark weren't so stacked in central midfield, then he would have had a phenomenal international career. But I guess it's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. He's a player I love watching, and if there was a compilation of all his beautiful touches, I would sit there and watch it on repeat for hours on end, because he's just he's a really, really lovely player to watch.
Yeah, and he's one of those ones who's, he's 28 now. He's been around for quite a while, hasn't he? He's always a name that kind of pops up, and I'm sure many people are familiar with him, to be honest. But he's kind of on the periphery at times, isn't he? Sort of thing. It's just someone that is always there in terms of the name. But no, as you said, he's an exciting player, and I think he should be an exciting one as well for FCK.
Yeah, I think he to have a player of that quality who's kind of not at the end of their career, not at the very beginning, is really important for just sort of stability and leadership at FC Copenhagen. And I think that he's becoming one of the kind of dressing room leaders, and bringing that sort of experience and calmness.
Yes. So we rounded it off. Fantastic stuff there, and a really great preview. You've got the teams to watch, the players to watch. Now the sort of burning question is, where can we actually watch them? Where can you watch games? Are there any kind of rights deals in the UK? How do you watch the games, and where can players look to tune in? Is there any good websites, that kind of thing, that people can keep an eye out for?
Yeah, so probably the easiest, and I don't know quite how the rights operate across Europe, but I know certainly in the UK, the LiveScore app has every single game in the Danish Superligaen, and sometimes you need to use they've got a separate betting app, so all of the games are on the betting app, but then normally they pull one or two of the bigger games each week into the LiveScore app, and that LiveScore app has the functionality as well that you can cast it to your TV, via Apple TV or Google Chromecast or whatever, and it plays in HD, English commentary. It's like it's like it's on your Skybox or cable box. So that's been an absolute revelation. But then also on the official Superliga website, the day after the games happen, they produce highlights of each of the games, again all available full HD, and a sort of 2-3 minute highlights of every game on the official website. So that combination of being able to have the live games really easily, and then the highlights for the games that you can't watch, that combination makes it a lot easier than previously to sort of get your Danish football fix.
Brilliant stuff. And I think that rounds it off for the show. You've been fantastic, Henry. Thanks so much for bringing us this preview. As I've said, we usually on the show weekly, for those who may be new listening, we usually cover Norway and Sweden. But who knows, maybe this season we might broaden it out a little bit and cover Denmark in a little bit more detail. I really appreciate this sort of primer for anyone who's listening. Don't forget you follow us on Twitter at Nordic Footpod. Subscribe to the podcast as well on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And Henry, where can listeners find you who may not know about you on Twitter and that kind of thing? Where can we keep tabs of yourself?
I keep it simple, just Twitter, no Instagram or anything. So you can find me at Football in DK on Twitter, and look forward to chatting with you about Danish football.
Yeah, it's fantastic stuff. And do you have a team yourself out there, or is it kind of do you take it from a neutral perspective? Is there teams you have a soft spot for, whether it's top division, second division, whatever?
Yeah, I'm into watching the league as a whole. I would say if I had a soft spot for a team, it's probably FC Copenhagen, just because it's the first team that I went to watch, and I like a lot of their team. I really love the stadium. I think you mentioned you've been to Parken yourself. It's a kind of classic sort of English style stadium. Very close to the pitch, four sides, great atmosphere. But don't hold it against me. I'm into watching the whole league. But yeah, if I had to pick someone, I would probably say them.
Yeah, and I would certainly recommend following the account. I mean, it's kind of, the breadth of the coverage. I mean, you've been looking at kits, you've been looking at the technical report from the league and things like that. So 100% the place to go for coverage of football in Denmark. So follow at Football in DK for more insights. But yeah, that's about it for this show. You can find me on Twitter at JFFootball, FUTBOL. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been great, and we'll be back to kind of round up Norway and Sweden in the weeks to come as well. With Steve, we'll be looking at the latest in the Champions League and the Conference League, which starts for our teams, I think, next week. So thanks a lot for listening to this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Send us some feedback on Twitter if you like, or tweet us what you think. And we'll be back very soon. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye from me, and thank you so much, Henry.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Keep up all the great work, and hope to speak to you later in the season as it develops.
100%. We'll be coming to you now for any kind of Danish insights that we need. So well done on setting up the account, and I hope it goes well for you. So that'll be all for this episode. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. We'll see you again soon. Take care and goodbye.